Hello and welcome to Corpradar, our Next Gen 4.0 corporate media house. And today we are going to discuss cybersecurity, one of the major issues post-pandemic, right? So today we have with us Mr. Prateek Lotia, Senior Security Engineer at Reddit. We welcome you, Mr. Prateek.
Hey, Tanya. I'm Corpradar. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to share my views with our audience here. And yeah, cybersecurity is a very hot topic. I deal with it on a regular basis. As you mentioned, I work for Reddit, helping them have a better security controls in place. Just to begin with, I will say that all the opinions that I present in this interview are completely my own and do not reflect anything related to my employer.
So thank you so much. And right now, you see, like communication has transformed completely to the digital world, right? We are in the era of digitalization where post-pandemic, we just see everything happening online, right? Even from a single person to the corporates, everybody is tracking this. And we are surrounded by the cyber attacks, the phishing attacks, and ransomware. So whatever is happening has exacerbated already the attacks, and it can lead to company closures also, right? So communicating with each other, networking is something that everybody is doing, and digital obviously is the part of that. We have a lot of networking forums, community forums, so where people actually interact. So we have a couple of questions with us, so I would like you to answer them. One of the major threats, like there's a lot of user generated content in terms of social forums, community forums, right? And like there is a approach that one should like cater while designing such platforms, right? So I feel you must be also experiencing such challenges when somebody is actually initiating the process to making it a big corporate, right? They need to have a very good bulletproof product architecture, right? So what do you suggest, like how should we go about it, and what are the strategies to keep that bulletproof architecture in place?
Certainly. Yeah. So I think the challenges for any user-generated social sharing platform can be like categorized into like platform challenges and then the challenges which users face. I'll talk more towards the platform challenges. I think the number one, the challenge here is that, hey, everything is a user generated content, and that's how these platforms work by definitions. So unlike other platforms where user actions are limited to a small set of things, with social media applications there is everything runs basically based on user generated content. So this means the platform has to enforce sufficient input sanitization checks to ensure that it does not intentionally or unintentionally lead to issues such as crashing the app with unexpected type of data, leaking the source code, leaking any error messages, also known as injection attacks, or leaking any logs or metrics from the platform. And then also like triggering any certain function calls on the server's operating system. Um, Especially because user data is like rendered on the client side of other users as well. One has to ensure that output sanitization of data also occurs so that other users do not face issues due to one user's activity. These are typically called as like cross-site scripting and cross-site for resource forgery attacks. And then another set of challenges is ensuring the right level of authentication and access control. Like there's a lot of private content on these platforms as well, which means the platform should do a fair job of enforcing who can view what and limiting what actions can be performed. To sum it up, I will say the OWASP Foundation does a great job at publishing the top 10 challenges for web applications, and they provide like with a list of things which companies should generally be aware of, especially for platforms which have heavy user interaction. It is definitely more critical to have the latest software updates and patches deployed, so the system is remediated against any vulnerabilities.
So
Um,
yeah, that
in
should be.
terms of additional challenges, I would say dealing with bots is a major problem as well, and it becomes harder and harder to distinguish between human and bot behavior. There is a statistic which says that the captcha or reCAPTCHA uh, prompt that we see. One of the statistics says that actually bots can perform captcha successfully than human beings. And even without sophisticated use of machine learning and artificial intelligence, bots can easily mimic human behavior. And then on a lot of platforms, bots are responsible for conducting a lot of business transactions, like they are making payments as well, buying tickets, buying products, etc. So now we have like good bots and bad bots as well. So ensuring like bad bots do not corrupt the data and do not influence the public opinion is also a major challenge.
Okay. So coming up towards the bots that you're just talking, so that is also leading us to fake information, right? There's a lot of spread of fake information on these forums, and it is very difficult to differentiate between what is true and what is not true, right? So these fake information spreads are quite vast in number, and like these are kind of the viral diseases that we have to trigger, right? If it doesn't stop, it creates a massive chaos in the society and as well as in terms of the corporates. So, how does this social networking community forums should use blockchain to minimize these kind of fake information spreads and like the false information that has to be minimized, one or the less? Yeah.
Sure. So I'll start with the problem with fake news or fake information, or also called disinformation. In general, content moderation is a challenge. Everyone likes to have freedom of speech, but there are times during which certain content can be considered as harassment, fake news, harming one's reputation, sexually explicit content, which needs to be taken down. So this gives a lot of power to human moderators to decide what content should be kept, what should be altered, what should be deleted, which means it's obviously prone to bias. Um, so with fake or disinformation, we have bots influencing opinions, and now also like AI generated models called deep fakes, which can generate very convincing audio, photo, and video information. For example, you can use a AI model and this interview recording to generate a new recording with completely altered information on what I said, and not even I would be able to prove that, hey, this is not me. So with blockchain, I think blockchain is definitely something which will help solve some of the challenges here, because it provides us with a decentralized and immutable ledger of records. This is information which can be continuously verified whenever the information is being passed from one medium to another. So a set of blockchain contracts would have to be developed, number one, to like track the source of information and then verify if it is generated by trusted news sources. So this is ensuring that it is coming from reputable news sources. Now, the second part of this is that we do not want to blindly trust these news companies, because they are also heavily influenced by external factors. So the blockchain contract would have to assign something like a trust score based on the content creator as well as the reputation of the previous information generated from such news sources. So that way you're continuously incentivizing the news source to provide quality information. And if you're not providing the right information, automatically there is less trust being put on it. And then the contract has to take into consideration how to track the distribution of content to ensure that information is being passed via reputable mediums without being altered in any way. And then finally, using blockchain, we need to incentivize true news and hold us all these sources of information accountable for the news that they provide. So this means like blockchain is only one part of the picture. Along with technology, we will need to have like strict and strong legal provisions to regulate news without censorship, so that we are able to add accountability, such that sources involved in fake news not only get lower trust scores, but they're also held responsible in the courts.
So that's quite precise and to the point, I must say. So, COVID has already created such kind of awareness in terms of health insurances, right? So people are very aware, right, that the health insurance is a mandation rather than an obligation. Similarly, coming to the cyber attacks, right, they are really massive in number. And the numbers are increasing day by day. And we need to be, and as an organization, corporates, SMEs, SMBs, all needs to be aware of these insurers, right? So cyber insurance is one of the booming industries that are coming up and helping the organization. So, there are several categories of cyber insurance, which includes liability, property, business interruption, and coverage. So, what are the key pointers a company should keep in mind developing such models so that they are aware and the cyber insurance that they are getting in return is secure and more stable in terms of the long run process?
It's funny that you mentioned this. Just last week, I was reading an article which mentioned that these professional threat actor organizations are now checking like which companies have cyber insurance, and then narrowing their focus to attack such companies because they know that it will lead to a good payout. Of course, I'm not saying you should not get insurance or you should get insurance. It's up to the risk appetite for an organization to see what is necessary for them. But when it comes to cyber insurance, it is necessary that the companies are abiding by the policies agreed to within the insurance clause. So things, important things here would be like preserving all types of logs and metrics for all the internal software systems to be able to track and prove how a security breach has occurred. So this would be very critical. Like more often than not, cyber breaches occur by employees getting compromised who already have administrative access to internal systems. And oftentimes this is left out of insurance clauses. So I think one needs to systematically evaluate what is the coverage included in the insurance and make sure that they are adding additional considerations for such kind of coverage, because companies need to take into account all types of breaches that can occur with them. So it is absolutely necessary for organizations to conduct an audit of the policies being implemented to ensure that there are no coverage gaps in what is being promised to the insurance provider. For example, when you get a car insurance and then you say you get into a car accident, if you're not wearing a seatbelt, then technically you are at fault. Similarly, with cyber insurance, you can have the best insurance provider, but if you do not have the sufficient security controls which you agreed to in the contract, then you are at fault for not having the right guardrails, and the insurance providers can refuse to provide the payout or whatever it's promised. So it definitely make sure to get. I'll add a few points here. Like definitely make sure to add coverage for any errors due to like vendors for faulty software. Like typically companies are using third-party software. So definitely a lot of times there are vulnerabilities and flaws in the implementation of such software, and companies cannot be responsible for that. So make sure there is coverage for that. You need to have like coverage for loss of data. Yeah, like we say, data is the new oil. So it's definitely important that as companies are capturing more and more user data, they are bound to be a big target for attackers. And at some point in time, you should just assume that there will be some loss of data occurring. So definitely have coverage for that. Closely related, but I think the most important is having coverage for ransomware. Like if your software systems are getting encrypted by threat actors and you do not have any other good way of retrieving your data from backups, then all you are left is at the mercy of threat actors, and you have to do the payment to ensure that you are getting your data back. So ransomware coverage would be very important there. Coverage for data breach and consequences of the legal actions from users. Again, we are in an era where cybersecurity breaches are not a question of if they will occur, but a question of when they will occur. So you need to assume that a data breach will occur sometime in the future, and users will take you to the courts and charge and have some legal action against you for faulty security practices. So your insurance need to take into consideration the efforts and the legal fees for working with these issues as well. and then also have coverage for as I mentioned previously, social engineering attacks. A lot of times there is like an employee getting compromised, so the attack is technically coming from an internally trusted system. So it's also important to have coverage for that. And then like just understand the policy coverage properly and conduct risk assessment to ensure that the gaps mentioned in the assessment are covered. So to sum it up, I would say like having the right set of digital forensics along with disaster recovery and backup processes would be key components when working with an insurance provider.
I think this can help organizations millions of dollars, right? So coming to the dollars, we are in the world of crypto, right? Digital currencies are all around. So financial institutions, everybody is keen towards blockchain technology, and the awareness is getting increased day by day. So digital currencies, cryptos are becoming the new trend. And we are seeing that organizations, even governments are launching their own digital currencies, right? So, like you see, these kind of security threats are becoming a major source of information, and we cannot predict from where the data leak is coming from, as you already have mentioned. So, how can financial organizations plan towards more resilient blockchain implementation that can take corrective measures towards cyber attacks, right? Because if $1 is lost, it can be $1 billion at the end of the day, too. So how can the financial institutions plan towards a more resilient kind of blockchain technology?
Yeah, because it's a very newer type of technology, this will unfortunately be a lot of trial and error to see what works out. And just like with any technology, it's a cat and mouse game or typical. The threat actors become smarter. The security guys also have to become smarter as well to deal with those attacks. So they will continuously be technology flaws which get introduced, which get discovered time and again, and our systems need to be capable to be uh, remediated quickly against such issues and be able to deal with software supply chain issues. A lot of times there are security vulnerabilities in like a third party software library that you're using, and that is leading to a vulnerability in your system as well. So definitely one needs to take into account how to prepare for that and how to be able to update their software systems to the latest software versions to prevent against such problems. Coming more towards like blockchain technology, like with decentralized applications, obviously there's a lot of security research being done as well to identify, hey, what are the potential top flaws in such systems, and they will change over time. But for the next few years, I think the most important things would be regularly testing the code, whether you're using Solidity or any kind of language, testing for logical flaws, especially when you're using a lot of like flash loans and balance checks when making the payments or any kind of financial transactions. Testing for various kind of logic, it would be very critical. And then you know not having any sensitive data over blockchain. Previously, one could have a lot of sensitive information on the back end, which could be used for various types of calculation. But since on blockchain, everything is exposed directly to the public, there's a public record and you cannot change that later. It is important to not have such kind of sensitive data directly being logged to the blockchain contract. Um, Also, there are a lot of flaws in some math protocols and cryptographic libraries that are being used. So it would be important to ensure that whatever protocols you're using are more up to date, and it's preventing arithmetic flaws as well as encryption flaws which can occur. And then reducing dependency on external untrusted contracts. So as we know, like a blockchain contract is supposed to be immutable, and you cannot technically change it. The workaround for this is how the way organizations do this is by having a dependency on an external contract so that they are able to continuously update their their offerings, their software systems, in spite of having a fixed blockchain contract, you're now also dependent on an external contract. So this also increases the chances of trusting untrusted contracts in the first place. So reducing dependency as much as possible would be very key here. There are like subtle things here, like prohibiting re-entrancy attacks, uh, etc. And then with this, definitely assume the worst case scenario and prepare for various kinds of possible attacks. For any kind of financial transactions which are occurring, like always have like a baseline of what is expected and have checks against any kind of anomaly, to limit, even if there is a flaw, to limit, like for example, you mentioned it could be an issue of $1, but that occurring continuously, whether any kind of like targeted attack or denial of service or attack that can immediately lead to billions of dollars. So having checks against and having an upper bound for all those checks would also be necessary.
Yeah, we are right now in the world of digital blockchain. Now the Web 3.0 is coming up, NFTs, all things are coming into the digital mediums, right? So the transformation is going on a massive scale. We are not able to stop it at some point of time, right? And we cannot stop from here. But yes, we can be more aware and more resilient towards the things that are not in favor with us. So you see, talking about manufacturing industries, right? They have a lot of digital assets that need to be catered on a daily basis. So, going from that offline manufacturing to now AI transformation and digital transformation coming up into the place. So, what key security measures as an organization, as a manufacturing organization, they should keep in mind that there are less kind of data breaches and their digital assets, whatever the mediums that they are safeguarded, right? Because in manufacturing process plants, these kind of attacks are becoming more and more prone. So one information leak, the product launch is disrupted. So many more examples are there, and it is very, very important for the manufacturing industry to cater such challenges. So how about that?
Yeah, certainly. I'll actually start with in one of the previous questions you asked about, hey, how to design a bulletproof architecture, and I don't think I did a fair justice there, so I'll answer that along with the question here. So I will say that there is nothing like 100% secure system. 100% secure system is probably which is offline, away from any internet access.
Yeah.
So and the cybersecurity world relies heavily on white hat professionals to find vulnerabilities and flaws in software code, and generate a timely patch to remediate. So this means that there are flaws which known as zero-day vulnerabilities, which are not even known to the software maker and are leveraged by nation states and professionally sponsored groups to attack into specific organizations. I think the goal of cybersecurity teams is to make it hard enough, make it time consuming, and not worth the investment of efforts for threat actors. So it's basically to deter them from attacking a particular system. Previously, we used to treat all external network traffic as untrusted and anything internal as trustworthy. Now we live in a system where employees are working remotely, everything is being accessed over the public internet. There are tons of integrations and automation workflows. So it is well understood that a system can get compromised by one of the numerous factors here, and that is why it is very necessary to enforce the least privilege methodology for systems, and to enforce a zero trust architecture where each part of the system has to prove its identity and privilege using a right set of authentication and authorization. So zero trust basically means that you want to enforce identity checks as well as assume that any communication with other systems can be modified, which includes input and output sanitization. And then the other aspect there is limiting changes made by human beings directly. As we know, human beings are more prone to errors, and if we are asked to do one particular activity 100 times, there is a good chance that we'll make an error in one of those activities. It's so easily to fat finger while running commands on the keyboard. So one needs to be using more automation to conduct sufficient QA checks before deploying changes, any kind of upgrades to the system. Now coming specifically to the manufacturing industry, and the digital assets, obviously, as we said, like data is the new oil, and organizations want to capture as much data as possible to predict behavior, train their machine learning models, create better algorithms for user engagement. I think one important aspect here is limiting collection of user data in the first place, so that you don't have to worry about protecting the data. I know it's difficult for organizations to digest that fact, but that's how they should be starting with. And then in terms of attacks on manufacturing systems and other industrial control systems, I think one still has to start with restricting the right set of physical access, whether it's a manufacturing plant or any kind of closely guarded system. Having the right set of physical access controls is still important, because again, social engineering is still a big deal there, and you can always trick someone into doing some kind of activity. Next will come the part of restricting logical access. So like firewalls have traditionally been used to limit certain types of network communication, and with manufacturing systems, it becomes an even more critical, important factor to have the right set of like network policies, to limit what communication elements are allowed between different parts of the system. um, Again, another important aspect would be continuously updating all parts of the software stack, making sure they are running on the latest software versions, and definitely being tested before that. And then within manufacturing, a lot of times, one is forced to use old and outdated hardware. So definitely invest in quality hardware, is which is compatible with newer software protocols and encryption methods. Also use, we generally say, hey, use multi-factor authentication for any kind of access to systems. Within manufacturing systems, I think one needs to use multi-factor authentication for any changes, any major changes to the schedule. So you would have ideally like a baseline model, for example. you know just to give a random example, if you are a manufacturing plant, or a plant which does QA on the water generation, or the water transmission water transport facility, then you would have some kind of baseline checks as to how much water is being transported, how much of it is being chemically treated, and any kind of changes to that schedule should ideally require like a human interaction to perform that major change. Also having redundancy and failure plans, like assume that your system will fail and your system will get breached. You need to have a proper incident response plan so that you are proactively preparing for such attacks, and at the same time you have some kind of backup and redundancy so that you can fail over two different types of system. Say your primary system is failing you. um, so that this will basically help you to get back to normal quickly. And then lastly, I would say conducting third party audits is necessary. You know we typically always think that, hey, we have sufficient security controls in place, but having a third party organization do audits to identify gaps in your coverage is important, so that an organization knows, hey, what is going right versus what still needs to be fixed. And towards the end, I will say that when you map out the security chain with its various components, humans are still the weakest link, and social engineering is far more prevalent, as it's relatively easier to trick human beings into clicking malicious links in emails or any form of communication, which then leads to systems being controlled by threat actors indirectly. So continuous human training is very important. Regular human training is important to make sure that employees are aware of what are the newest social engineering trends, and how threat actors can trick them with various offers, and very interesting emails. And that's why depend more on automation workflows with sufficient checks in the process.
Thank you so much. That was quite insightful. And I'm sure with your answers, with your knowledge base, the organizations can take the corrective measures that needs to be done right now, straight away. So thank you so much, Prateek, for having this opportunity. And we are really privileged to have you on board with Corpradar.